Hello, everybody. Episode 14 of the Attractions Group podcast. I'm Don Helbig, joined by Ryan Suhr. And Ryan, we are in the middle of the Halloween season, one of my favorite times of the year to go to different parks throughout the industry. Do you enjoy this time of the
You
year?
know what I do? I'm not a huge Halloween guy. Like I know there's some people that count down the days to Halloween starting in, November 1 or whatever. That's not me, but when it comes to October, late September, man, I get into the season like anybody else. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, same thing here. I mean, I always like seeing the different, seasons at the parks. I like the spring when everything, is starting to bloom in that. I like the summer months, a lot of festivals and different things take place at those times. And then you get into the fall, it's the Halloween season. And then you have those winter events. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I just like to see it, that over those 4 quarters, just the different things that happen throughout the industry.
Yeah. So, well, as we alluded to, the subject for today's episode is very appropriately Halloween season in the theme park industry. This is episode 14. It should have been episode 13. We ended up having Taylor from Coaster Studios on last week, which totally screwed up our schedule because how appropriate would it be to be episode 13 in Halloween? But that's neither here nor there. So, really
We
exciting.
just got to be smarter about this, Ryan. We just got to be a little bit smarter with our content calendar and look at the number and see if there's any kind of thing we can tie into. We
I know
just didn't get it
both of
done
us
there.
being marketing people should have gotten that, and
Mm.
but we've got all those lobbyists and investors pulling us in different directions, and you got your Halloween people and your Coaster Studios people trying to lobby for the next episode. So that's neither here nor there. So Don, let's talk about Halloween. Obviously, the roots trace back for centuries, so that's not really what we're getting into here. Um, the Halloween in the theme park industry is generally accepted to have started with Knott's Berry Farm. But I would say that the true origins, for a widespread standpoint, go around the year 2000 or so. And that's when you saw a
Yeah,
lot of the
yeah.
parks adding Halloween events. Um, so how do you think that it's evolved since that time? Between 2000 and 2022, a little over 20 years. What do you think the difference is now?
Well, I think when it first started, what the parks were looking at was just a way to extend the season a little bit longer into October. A lot of parks, they would typically shut down right after Labor Day. So it was a way to just add some additional dates there. Added value for pass holders was another reason to do it. But around 2005, 2007 type range, the Halloween season really took an uptick, throughout the country, and it just became, retail, everything involved with Halloween. It just became a big, business, one of the busiest times of the year for everybody. And it evolved from there, from something that you were just really doing to just extend the calendar a little bit and have some added value to now it's very much a part of every park's marketing plan.
Yeah, it's funny. I been fortunate over the past 5 or so years to really develop a relationship with a guy named Bill Balfour, who we both know, that was responsible for bringing what they called Fear Fest to the Paramount Parks in 2000. And he described to me what a scramble it was. For Kings Island, particularly, he said that he either rent or purchased most items from, I think he called it Madison Scare Gardens, so that
Yeah.
all of it was secondhand originally,
Mhm.
because they didn't have time to develop it, nor did they have anybody to develop it. And then they got John Hawkins, who later went on to own Oak Island Creative, ended up designing a bunch of stuff for them. So that's really cool. And then obviously it's separated out. So in a lot of cases, a lot of it was third party because they just didn't have a person. But now almost a lot of parks have dedicated teams that handle this sort of thing. Would you agree with that?
They do. I mean, there is a team, at most parks, and that's what they focus on. It's almost become like a year-round, job planning for that event. You need a big team to put it together. I can remember, the early years, early 2000s when I would go to different parks to experience their Halloween events. Wanting to see the park in a different light at those times, or dark, you could say. But there wasn't a lot going on. I mean, there might be three, four haunted, what they would call attractions, mazes that you would go through, and maybe a couple rides. You didn't really have the scare actors roaming the midways or anything like that. You didn't have the Halloween themed live entertainment shows. So it was almost just kind of just trying to see what's going to work. What things would guests want to see, and just kind of evolve from there. And really around the mid early 2000s, 2005, 6, 7. That's when it really exploded throughout the attractions industry.
Yeah, and it's funny because any park really has a successful Halloween event, a night event. It's you can basically open the doors and people will come. But most recently, in the past like 5 or so years, it seems like the daytime family-oriented stuff has become a huge part of it as well. In fact, I'm going to pull up on Twitter. I actually asked our users what the future of haunt is. And it was kind of an interesting reaction because I figure, given the demographics we have right now, they'd be like, it's going to be more scary, it's going to be more extreme. But this is the breakdown. So 12% thought that the future of Halloween at theme parks is going to be more scary and edgy. 24% thought it was going to be more family friendly, and 64% thought it was a mixture of both. So that implies to me, the way that I interpret it is fun by day, fright by night, as many parks market it. But at night, when you open the gates, I mean, it's a matter of where do you want to close the spigot because there's so many people. During the day, it's becoming like that too. Very, very popular with the costume contest and so on. What do you think you attribute that to, especially in the past 5 or so years where it's taken off?
Well, like I said, it's become just a huge event. Halloween. Before you had Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July. That's what everybody thought about. Well, now Halloween's in that same grouping for what people like to do. The adults like to go to the Halloween parties at work, Halloween parties with their friends. Kids, the same thing. You're having all these different, Halloween activities and things at schools. So it's just really become a way of life with people. It's just something that you do along with those other holidays that are out there that you look forward to every year. So it just kind of evolved from that. But everybody's involved, Ryan. So it's not just the scare seekers that like this event, the Halloween season, but it's also the families, the parents with young children. They like to take kids trick or treating, and when you look at the attractions industry, and they have these different events where kids can go trick or treating, and that that's in a very controlled type of environment, and it's kind of more fun than just taking them through neighborhoods.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I feel like there's a lot more to work with too, because there's trick or treating or trunk or treating in parts of the country, and it seems like most parks do that, and some of them do it better than others. But you can also kids don't understand this, but there's the harvest aspect. That's where the corn and stuff comes through, and that's why there's a lot of tractors and stuff like that. So I feel like maybe there's a lot to do. So that creates an attractiveness with the kids and stuff. Let me ask you this. So as far as nighttime haunts, like the scary adult stuff, all right? So especially being in Ohio as you are, and I'm close to Ohio for those of you paying attention at home. Ohio is one of the number one places for not just haunted houses, but nationally ranked haunted houses. In the Cincinnati area alone, there's Land of Illusion, which is like 5 houses and it's its own complex. And there's a Dent Schoolhouse, which is nationally ranked as one of the scariest haunted houses in the United States. How do you set your event apart? How do you make it just not another Halloween event?
Well, you have different things going on besides just the that those are like you said, the schoolhouses and those kind of things are basically one experience. Where in the attractions industry, the theme park industry, you have whether you're open 5, 6, 7 hours, whatever your time frame is for those events. It's an immersive experience. You have other things besides the scare mazes, the scare zones, the live entertainment. You have oftentimes rides are a big part of that experience. Everyone loves night rides. What better time to do it in the fall? When the parks are open longer into the night, and you have the culinary experience during the Halloween season. You see a lot of those seasonal favorites, coming onto the menu and things like that. So it's just a more immersive experience for everybody than just going to one of those, standalone type haunted attractions when you're looking at what we do here in this industry.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, comparing just the two examples that I gave you between Dent Schoolhouse and Land of Illusion, Land of Illusion, like I mentioned, is like 5 haunted houses, and they've got this big camp where there's a campfire. They often have live bands. They've got wrestling on certain nights. They've got a DJ. All sorts of stuff. So you can make a night out of it, and I think that that's very both attractive and marketable. Because if you go through a haunted house, you pay 20 or gosh, sometimes 30 or $40 nowadays. And it takes you 25 minutes, 45 minutes for a good one to get through it. And then what do you do for the rest of the night? But with a theme park, you can occupy your whole time. And I think it even has kind of a broader appeal. Very few people don't go because they don't like haunted houses, because they know they don't have to do haunted houses. Now, I know most parks are marketing the no boo necklace and, different iterations of that. But I think that a lot of people that just aren't particularly fond of haunted houses will go for the night rides. I think night rides are a very marketable and a very well liked thing, even outside of the enthusiast communities. So I think you really hit the nail on the head with that. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, that's a big part of it, and just atmosphere. You mentioned a lot of people, maybe they don't like going through the haunted mazes, but they do like the atmosphere. They like watching other people, get scared, and you can see that on the midways. You can just, if you're into people watching that, and just kind of watch, people getting scared as the creatures come out from behind trees and buildings, and pop out behind trash cans, things like that. So that's a lot of fun too. So it's just a great night event Halloween season, no matter how you want to experience it.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a lot of fun to be had. Um, I mean, personally, being a 39-year-old man, I don't really have the jump scare. I mean, occasionally, somebody gets me or whatever in a maze, but I think the attraction for me is just really appreciating a haunted house as a work of art. Knowing that there was a human hands on this, like that designed it and created it and stuff. But to me, I think the most impactful mazes, shows, and I guess scare zones too, is the ones that tell a story. Because you can
Hmm.
do a circus, you can do a corn maze or whatever. Um, you're involved in one with an abandoned hotel, which I think is a great story. What do you think that the storyline aspect? What factor do you think that plays in everything?
Well, I think it plays the same way as putting in a new rides today. People like that story driven attraction with it, so it's kind of immersive. So you're as you're going through the queue in that for rides, there's a story to it before you get to actually ride the ride. So it's the same way with these Halloween mazes where there's a backstory to it. You know that story before you enter the maze, and I think that really enhances the experience
I
for you.
completely agree, and I think that but the thing that really attracts me to like haunts, like live shows, is that they tell a story. Oftentimes they have a storyline, because I can see a musical review anywhere. I can, snapping to the 60s or whatever. But when you have me in a story for 25 minutes, and sometimes it's got some good shock value and stuff, I think that's like the coolest thing ever. So Don, when
Well,
when we're talking about choosing how far to go in a Halloween situation. Because I remember there was a marketing of no one and nothing is off limits. I feel as though most parks, most chains do not feel that way anymore. Where do you draw the line between fun and gory and distasteful? Like, I know you
well,
can't
I,
speak on behalf of everybody, but in your opinion, in your observation.
I just think, the industry as a whole, I think, as everyone was getting into these Halloween events, you had to kind of find your way, what's going to work with your audience. And, who your guests are, but, it's maybe something that, you know, if you're about families and that, they're not going to always like the blood, terror, and the gore, that kind of thing. So I think as parks, got into this, sometimes it was more about the quantity, just throwing things everywhere around the park to try to dress it up for Halloween. To now, when you go to parks throughout the country, you might not see as much, you know, out there in the park as far as all the decoration that go. But what is out there is a much more polished, a better presentation with the decor than we've ever seen in the industry. I think a lot of parks they do it so well now, and that's a part of the allure too for guests that come to the park. Especially during the daytime, they like to walk around and look at all the different things that are out on display, and you get to see the park in a different different way with that. And then at night, it kind of takes on its own personality in that there. But I think you started out in this. Everybody's getting involved and jumping in and not really knowing what they have, and they're trying different things, and it starts to be trying to be over the top and edgy and shock value, and then you find your way. And I think that's kind of it's evolved over the years to what you're seeing today. And some really like that intense type of an event, but maybe for certain parks it didn't work that well with their audience, their market. So they, changed it up to make it, what's going to be success for them today. So, you know, sometimes you'll hear, why isn't it like, let's point out Universal. They do a phenomenal job, and um, but not everybody can be that, and it's a different type audience going there. It's not the locals. You're planning 6, 8, 10 months out to go experience that event. And you're coming from all over the country to do it. Where like a park in the Midwest, East Coast, that's not the case. You're coming from 30 minutes to an hour away to go there, and it's a lot of times, and it's a season pass holder who's been to your park 10, 15 times during the year, and you know they might not like that. They might still want to have a lot of the things that they're accustomed to, with the rides and shows and different things like that. So I think you just have to find out, and it takes time. It takes years to figure out what's the best, uh, you know, way to go for your particular market.
Yeah, I agree. And you brought up Universal, and I think that's an interesting case study because anytime I've told anybody, well, not anybody, this is the very anecdotal, but, I mentioned like, oh, Haunt is really good this year. They're like, yeah, but it sucks compared to, Halloween Horror Nights. And you just want to slap them in the face because Halloween Horror Nights, not even for the reasons you listed, I feel like it's a completely different product because I think they're going for something else. Because I feel like the average Haunt, whether it's Cedar Fair, Six Flags, even like SeaWorld, um, is about the environment and the startles and the jump scares and stuff like that, while Horror Nights does what they do best. They try to put you almost in like a movie setting. I understand that a lot of their intellectual property nowadays is not movies, it's original IP, but they
Mhm.
try to make an environment in the house where you're the victim of Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger or whatever. And hats off to them because they do the a darn perfect job at it. They do a great job. But I don't think that the two products are comparable. That's like how do I
They're not,
yeah.
and when you're trying to, when you're drawing from, coast to coast, it's going to be a little bit of a different, type guest coming there. They're coming specifically for that type of thing, and when you're relying on more of a local or regional uh, audience, you're not going to have that kind of same, it's not going to work as well for you. So you have to understand, who your audience is, um, and kind of build your event around that.
I agree. And to your point though, I would say that the budget that they have for these houses, and they seem to like kind of edge around telling people what they are. It's pretty well accepted. It's well into the millions for each house. But at the same time, when you have a like a Stranger Things house or whatever, people will get on an airplane and they will fly to Orlando or California to go through that Stranger Things house. It's incredibly marketable for a huge region. While at the same time, the event overall itself is what's marketable for a Fright Fest or a Halloween Haunt or Halloween Weekends or whatever.
Yeah, and you have the other situation too, where there's year-round parks. Their Halloween events are going to go daily.
Hmm.
For the most part. Disney and Universal Net, and it starts. When it does in September, and it's all 6 weeks and 30 plus nights and that. And you look at the other, the seasonal parks. It's 6, 7, 8 weeks weekends. So you're having 12 to 18 nights of this. So it's a totally different ball game, not comparable at all in what what the two events
Well, the
are.
cool part though is, if Universal is going to spend millions of dollars on a lot of the development and stuff, the seasonal parks can pick and choose what makes sense out of that library. Not necessarily copying a house or anything like that, but they've got a lot of people absolutely dedicated to just designing one house. There are people right now that are designing a house for next year or even the following year at Universal Orlando, and they think about these things. They have time to think about every single little turn. So I think that
Yeah, but
almost, in a good way, moves the industry forward, the Halloween industry, because they come up with the ideas that nobody else thinks of, and then hopefully they can take it and market it at Trans World or in different conventions like that, and then the regional parks can pick and choose out of that sort of stuff as to what makes financial sense and sense for their storyline and their demographic and so on. So I think it's a good thing personally, don't you?
yeah, I think so.
Because I would say that the contrary would be that Mickey's Not So Scary is, it's a nighttime event, but it's the same thing as the daytime stuff at other parks, and that's sitting on a completely different shelf. So that's something you could aspire to, but it's almost you can compare them though. I think that's.
Yeah, but you look at those 2, parks not that far
Hmm.
apart, from each other, totally different type of events, but also just look at, again, the audience, the crowd. Go to Universal, one day on a Tuesday, go to Disney, Magic Kingdom or something on a Wednesday, and you're gonna see a totally different, audience going to those places. So, if you're Disney, you could not do, what Universal
Oh
does, and
no.
if you're Universal, you could not do what Disney does. So, I mean, you gotta be who you
Yeah,
are.
and it's funny what a I'm trying to look for my wording here. Coexistence. That's the word I'm looking for. It's funny what a coexistence they have because they could not be more different when it comes to especially Halloween. And it's even like almost everything really, but I guess that's when two companies that are essentially similar, and I'm talking about like a very macroscopic thing because you can split hairs and talk about how different they are. But, you know, Mickey does not or Mickey Walt Disney World does Mickey's Not So Scary, and that is completely different from Horror Nights, polar opposite. They also do um, Christmas really well, and Universal doesn't really worry about Christmas. It seems like I know they have a Christmas event, but it's not as well known or promoted as the other one. But on the other hand, they have Mardi Gras, and Disney doesn't touch that. So
Yeah,
it's
again, 2 different audiences going to those parks for the most part, and, when you got young kids in that, you're gonna be more inclined to, wanna do, Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween and the Christmas event there. You get older, you have teenage kids now, 16, 17, 18 years old, they're gonna be more interested maybe in going through, the mazes and things that Universal has during the Halloween season. So it's just really, I mean, it's just understanding, your market, who your audience is, and you create your event around that. And I think Universal's known for a long time who they are, so you don't see too much change with it. A lot of these other parks, the seasonal parks around the country, they've evolved, and their events are now tailored to really what works best.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because to add a third dimension to it, they've got both Hallows Scream at Tampa, Busch Gardens Tampa, and I don't know if they're calling it Hallows Scream at SeaWorld as well, but that's more in line with like seasonal parks. It's the haunted house, jump out, boo kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And it's funny because you and I both have a lot of friends that live in Orlando, and it's when I go down there, the parks that I want to visit are Disney and Universal and stuff that offer a completely different experience from what I'm used to. But they're always like, "Oh man, I can't wait to get back to Busch Gardens Tampa." And for me, Busch Gardens Tampa is it's a wonderful park, but it's a really nice Kings Island, you know. So they want to go and they want to ride the roller coaster and stuff because that's not what they're used to. But for me, I want to go down there and I want to ride a bunch of dark rides and stuff because that's not what I'm used to. But coming around with that, you know, Universal has their super scary event. Disney has their kid friendly event. Both are on. Let's say they're both polar opposites on the magical side, and then SeaWorld has their event, which is the more jump scare boo kind of thing. So that's a whole third prong in knowing your audience and knowing who you're marketing to.
Hmm.
So it took some really smart people to figure out that there's a spot for SeaWorld in this, but it appears that there is.
Yeah, and there's a spot for every park out there in the attractions industry that there's something that's going to fit who you are as a brand, and who's typically coming to your park throughout the spring, summer, maybe even the winter, so you kind of work with that, and that's kind of been kind of the blueprint that you've started to see these events evolve into over the last 10 years.
I think technology's played a fantastic part in this as well. I think you can do such cool things with lights and sounds and stuff nowadays. You know, um, like at Kings Island, they've got that thing at midnight, which is the coolest thing ever. I'm super excited to see that again this weekend. But that lends to telling a story. There's a story told throughout the night, and that means so much to me to know that that's like the effort put into it. And I'm not going to describe what it is. You're just going to have to go out to the park and be there at midnight and close and see what happens beyond I Street. That's what you told me, and I had experienced it for myself. Um,
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I said, there's all those different, fun things. It doesn't always have to be, the, a real intense, blood, terror, gore type of event to work and be a lot of fun and something you want to do over and over again.
yeah, I mean, like, because Halloween can be several different things, and not all are appropriate from all demographics. Because Halloween is scary. Halloween is, I wouldn't necessarily say angry. Let's take that out because that's not a factor in this. It's definitely sexual in some cases. Um, it's passion is a big part. Wow is a big part. I mean, if you play off of any of those kind of emotions or pseudo emotions, you can really come up with some great ideas. You do things with spotlights and lasers and things like that. It's really cool. Um,
Yeah, a couple years ago before, before COVID, I went to a park that had a really nice Halloween, and I was telling, some of my friends about it. They go to all these different parks and they were like, well, why would you go there? They don't have any mazes or anything. It didn't
mhm.
have to, it was, it was all about like the decor, the food and those kind of things. And, just a fantastic, fall event. And, so you were able to do it that way too, without having to go to that degree, with all the scare
Yeah, and
tactics.
and I think that would be tantamount to saying, me and my family went to the pumpkin patch on Saturday afternoon, and them saying, "Did Jason Voorhees attack you?" And it's like, no, that's not the same Halloween. That's a different end of. That's when it gets dark. I completely
Yeah.
agree, and I think that I mean, we should talk about like the food aspect of Halloween. Because up until a few years ago, it was about candy. It's not about candy anymore. So many parks
No,
have
no. It's all those sweet and
sweet
savories.
and say exactly like a lot of the I noticed a lot of parks are going the direction of like pastries and stuff, so it's not individually wrapped candy as traditionally associated with Halloween, but full food items that are just associated with fall and the harvest. I think that's really cool. Where do you think that evolution came
It
from?
is. I just think it evolves from what you're doing, in the spring and summer months, where you've the culinary experience at parks throughout the country. It's really come a long way from just hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken tenders. So now you're getting all these different types of things. But you just look at all the like you said, the pastries, that all these parks are doing, and it's one of those things where you go to these events now and you're driving home, you know, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, you're talking about the maze you went through or maybe those night rides. Well, now you're talking about, those treats and things that you had, the cookie that you got at this place or the cupcake or, um, the brownies, whatever it might be. And you're talking about those items as much as you are the different things you experienced, you know, that you would have really raved about going home. But now food has a place in that same
I
conversation.
completely agree. And I would make the argument that if you are an operator of a slightly smaller than medium to large size park, and you can't say that food is an attraction, you're 3 years behind the times because every other park that is having successful runs and is showing growth and stuff is using food as an attraction. I would bet I would say I'm probably correct 75% of the time. You can sell tickets by selling food, and it's a win-win. I mean, even like I mentioned this on a previous podcast. I went to Busch Gardens Williamsburg over the summer, and we bought the meal plan just out of convenience, and the food just from around the countries and stuff was an attraction, and that's what we remember most. You know,
Yeah, and let's talk about those meal plans. Ryan, when I was really getting involved with the industry as a pass holder, no park had a dining plan. No park had anything other than, well, Bush had, some of its own. Bush had its own, different types of menus, with the Italian
right?
and different things that you go around there. But for the most part, the parks I was visiting, hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken tenders, pizza, good, but typical theme park food at that time. And now I look at it and I'm like, I really wish that there was a dining plan when I had season passes to like 8 different parks,
Right.
at the same time. And I would have had a dining plan for each one. And I would have gone looking, uh, I would have been as excited about the food that I was going to experience during the Halloween season at these
Hmm.
places, as I would the mazes or getting those night rides in. And I always think that the pass holders today, they have no idea across the industry, how good you have it compared to what it was like, in the 80s when passes were really, just coming into
Right.
vogue there.
Yeah, and I think you have to be about my age to fully understand because I was fully vested in the parks both before and after. So I was around. I mean, I've had a season pass to at least one park for 30 years now. But I would say that I got heavily involved around 2002, 2003. So there was some weird fringe benefits to having a season pass, but there were no meal plans and stuff. That was like a 2014, 2015 kind of thing industry wide. Um, but let me say you this, to back up what I was saying. You mentioned meal plans, but with food being an attraction, I mean, tell me you've ever been mad about paying the $25 or $30 to eat at Aunt Granny's. When food is an attraction, you get
You
your money's
you
worth
you
out
don't
of it.
mind.
It doesn't matter. But one thing I'm a big proponent of is the tasting cards. I really like those. I know that Dollywood's doing for a lot of their festivals and a bunch of the Cedar Fair parks and stuff. But I really like having the samples and being able to try a bunch of things, and then even going back for seconds because I'm a fat kid. Um, but
Well, Ryan, if I was a pass holder today, I'd be doing the same thing when I was going to these parks. I'd be buying all the dining plans. I'd be getting, and I do when I go to the different places. I still, look. That's one of the first things I look for. Do they have a dining plan? And
mhm,
especially in the fall, during the holiday season, Christmas. I want to see, what the seasonal food, what's on the menu there.
mhm.
And then the second question is, do they have a dining plan? Because I'm going to take full advantage of that if they do.
I completely agree. And when it comes to like season pass add-ons and stuff, when you got a home park, a lot of it's self-evident. You're going to get the dining plan, you're going to get the drink plan, you're going to get the picture plan, all that stuff. That's, but for a park that, I mean, I've got a park that I'm a season pass holder to that I live about 4 hours from, that I do about three trips to a year. And even at that, I bought some add-ons because it came down to thinking about like, well, what makes sense for me? So like, well, the drink plan, I mean, I'm not going to use that every day, but it is convenient to be able to just grab a drink, even if it doesn't
Yeah.
financially make sense every time. The convenience of it. Same with like, even the meal plans in some cases. I don't have to fumble around with scanning my credit card or whatever. You just assume you're going to break even at the least. Most of the times you come out ahead, you know.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, circling back to the Halloween season, you particularly, what we talked about. There's the real intense, Halloween events. There's the hybrid, the best of both worlds. Fun by day, fright by night type events. There is just the family events, and then there's the ones that's kind of a blend of
Hmm.
both. So for you personally, what do you like the best?
That's a good question. There are elements of all of it that I like. If I had to narrow it down and pick one, though, definitely nighttime stuff. I love parks at night in general. Um, if you had asked me this question like 10 years ago, I would have said the more extreme, the better. Nowadays, it's kind of like I love the storytelling aspect, as I mentioned. So if you've got shows or houses or whatever that tell a really good story, I'll really appreciate that. So I would say that the narrative, the things that have the narrative are the things that I like the best. It doesn't have to be super shocking, and it doesn't necessarily have to be non-offensive or benign or anything like that. But if you have that element, that's what's going to excite me. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would have been more about the intense scares, but then when you have kids and you're going to these events or parks with them, that changes too what you're looking for. So for me, um, I kind of like that blend where it touches on, there are scary elements to it. The atmosphere is great, the food is great, and you get to ride all your favorite rides at night. That's the kind of event that I like. Is where it kind of touches a little bit of everything. It's not focused heavily on one thing or the other, but there's a little bit of everything, and it works for everybody in my family when we go to those events.
I'd say that's fair. I mean, and especially when it comes to the daytime trick or treating and stuff, that's something adults and kids can kind of enjoy together risking, giving grandma coronary or anything like that, obviously. Um, so, in your experience, Don, what would you say makes a successful Halloween show? And let me pad this question a little bit, because there have been a lot of shows out there. Bill and Ted at Universal ran for 20 years or so, so that had its own legacy, and that was an attraction in itself. And then there have been other ones where it's singing and dancing. There's been live bands. There's been circus stuff. There's been um, you know, uh, the stomp style thing, people beating on stuff, as I call it, show has been pretty widespread throughout the industry. What do you think makes a successful show in terms of not a one and done, but you can bring it back the next year and possibly in the future after that?
Well, I think, we touched on it earlier. You want to see a storytelling component to it. That's what, I think makes a good show is that there is a story to it. You can follow that story. And then after you watch the show, it's something that you want to come back and watch again. And if you're going to watch it that second, third, fourth time, then you have a winner on your hand with that. But I think storytelling goes just, such a long way, especially, at this time of the year with the Halloween events. Instead of, like you said, just, banging on things and doing that, when there's a story, it just really enhances that show.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I would also add that having a little bit more dimensions to the show, even the storytelling, I would say is absolutely king. That's number one, no doubt. But adding different elements to the show, like I've noticed that recently. Throughout the industry, the really successful, because it seems like there's more money being put into shows. Nationwide from what I've observed. But it seems like the ones that really keep the audience's attention are not just a half pipe with a bunch of bikers on it or singing and dancing or whatever. It's a mixture of all of them. So nothing really gets old.
Yeah, and I like the makeup too. What the whether they're singers, dancers, whatever in the show, that they're dressed up for the Halloween season as well. Uh, a few weeks ago, I had a chance to check out Halloween Weekends at Cedar
Hmm.
Point, and there was a show called The
Yep.
Shrieks. Now, costumes great, the music was great, stage looked great, but to me, what made that show was I was really, really impressed, with the lighting,
Hmm.
the lighting package that they put into it,
Sounding more
and
like
I
me
thought
every
that just
day.
that just really added so much to that show. So if you're going to Cedar Point, be sure to check out the Shrieks. But just things like that. It makes just a huge difference than just your typical, singing and dancing type show when there is that lighting
Oh
package
yeah.
to it
Oh well, and
and
the
the
storytelling.
special effects and things like
I
that.
mean, it's like
Yeah,
let's pick
exactly.
on Cedar Point a little bit more. Midnight Syndicate. I'd always heard that, oh, it's a really good show and stuff. Me and my girlfriend went there and we watched the show just somewhere to sit down. And she's not as into shows as I am, but I talked her into it and we sat down and they started doing their Electrica thing. And it's like, okay, cool. We get to sit here in the air conditioning for, 25 minutes or whatever. And then like the lights dimmed and like there was a seance and like it was so I remember my mind being blown by that show. It was so much more than I expected it to be. And that is a
Yeah,
perfect example of taking what could have been a pretty good show and making it a great show through storytelling.
yeah, and it's the 25th anniversary for that
Rightfully
show,
so.
and,
25 years.
the main character yeah, so you're gonna come back and they, do different, things with it. It's not the same show every single year, with especially this year with the 25th, it kind of, plays back. If you've watched that show, over the years, you see how it all kinda comes together this year, so I'm not gonna, give it all away there, but those characters,
Mhm.
that are in that show, they're recognizable by the guest, and they incorporate them in different parts of that event throughout the night. Kind of the opening ceremony on that, and it just really adds to it that you've got these characters from that show, and people recognize them, and they get as excited to see them, outside of the theater doors, as they do just sitting in the audience
How
watching.
much do you think that an opening ceremony adds to the important? I mean, like not necessarily added value from a marketing standpoint, but from the ambiance and stuff. Do you think that it's really important to have an opening ceremony? Because it seems like some do and some don't.
I think it adds, it enhances the experience for you. It's a kind of the official start of the event instead of just opening the gates and go. It kind of gives you that, um, you know, here's the launch of my evening, my night of fright.
Yeah, I completely agree. Some people tie it into their storytelling, and I'm not going to tell you where to be at midnight this Friday and Saturday, but being there for opening is very important for that storytelling element. Um, okay, well, do you have any final thoughts on this before we go? We got a couple questions from Twitter.
Yeah, I was going to say, we had that Twitter question out there. So what do we have, Ryan?
Well, we have some Twitter questions. You know what, Don? You know what we forgot to mention at the top of the show? We hit 100 Twitter followers, speaking of Twitter, and we're going to give away something tonight, but you have to stay to the end of the show to figure that out. Okay. So from Twitter. So Andrew Sitwell. So this is at, I'm sorry, Stillwell. I apologize, Andrew. And this is at Stillwell. He says, feels like there's a lot of the same types of mazes and experiences at theme parks: corn mazes, circus clowns, butcher shop, medical facility, etc. Is there a horror slash haunted trope, either IP or not, that you think hasn't been effectively explored in a theme park setting? Great
First thing that comes to
question.
mind from what, yeah, great question. First thing that come to mind to me is, maybe you look towards sports a bit
Hmm. That was
or
exactly what I
something
was
like
thinking.
that.
When Kings Island announced Field of Screams, oh God, it was probably 10 years ago at this point. I assumed it was going to be one of those mazes where you go through and in each room, each sport is represented. But just imagine that, like you can have, I mean, and you can do it well. It doesn't have to be cliche. So you can have, people with baseball bats in one room, and you know, what I would do. I was thinking about a football room. I think it would imagine this, Don. This is probably your fantasy, but this would be scary for everybody else. But you enter a room, and you have six scare actors that are at least as tall as me, like 6'1", 6 feet tall or whatever. They surround you, and they're you know not touching you obviously, but they're surrounding you, wearing all their pads and stuff, maybe even blown up a little bit. And in the corner, you got a coach that's yelling at you, telling you're a maggot and to get back on the field and stuff. And you have to work your way through them. And then you can have some like fun tongue in cheek things with golf or whatever. But I think that a sports theme maze would be really cool. It could be funny. It could be scary. Um, it could be you know anything else, because sports are so benign. They're not scary. But if you make them scary, then that's an IP, or not really an IP, but that's a subject matter that you haven't explored yet. Can you think of anything else?
Yeah, I mean, not off the top of my head. I mean, that was just such a great question. You'd really have to look and, understand what already is out there, and then, what hasn't been done. But, really appreciate that question.
Yeah,
Great
yeah, and
one.
I think that a lot of the stuff that Andrew mentioned, a lot of it's low hanging fruit. As I mentioned, you're going to have corn because of the harvest. A lot of people are scared of clowns, so you're going to have clowns. Darkness, yeah, all that stuff. That's going to be done. Okay, cool. So next question, and this is from our friend Jim Flugel at Jim Flugel. He says, when deciding a new haunted house project, how much time and planning goes into the decision process, and what types of groups are involved in making this house a reality? Great question, Jim.
I think that, people would be surprised how far in advance you start to think about these things.
Yes.
You had mentioned the Hotel St. Michelle at Kings
Mm-hmm.
Island, late December, early January, that concept started to be developed. So, you can go, what is it now, 10, 9 months before it opens. So, I mean, 9 to 10 months for something like that. But it can be, as far back as 2 to 3 years, you're thinking about, what's going to go in this building in the future. You're going to build a new location somewhere. Um, so, yeah, I would say, anywhere from 10 months to 2 to 3 years, you're thinking about this depending on the level of your event.
What about live shows?
I think you're pretty much going to be in that same boat where you're going to be talking about a year out. What are you going to do there? You always know when you have a show, whether it's coming back the next year, you have to replace it, so you already have concepts in mind. If you're going to replace it, you better have something ready to
Right.
go. So it's always going to be a year plus on the entertainment part of it.
So would you argue, and this is construing your words a little bit, but so October of 2022, you've got a decent idea of what's going in that venue in October of 2023, with serious planning starting maybe in December or so.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're looking at that. That event or that maze is going to come back, or that show is going to come back, If it's not going to, the wheels are turning. You're already working on it. You're thinking about, what you would need in each room, and you go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been intrigued by that. I think that obviously, my observation has been that as far as casts are concerned, for both haunted houses and for shows, that's a lot of returners. You'll see the same people in the shows during October that you do during the summer in a lot of cases, at least to fill the gaps. And then,
You do, and there, yeah, I can tell you too, Ryan. There are times, where parks, you're thinking about a show that you want to do, but you have to have, somebody in mind that's going to already play those roles
right,
to make it work.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I would say, especially if it's locally produced or whatever. And I've noticed that at least locally, a lot of times the lead performer of shows has been from somewhere else in the country. So maybe they wrote the show around somebody. I think that's entirely possible. Um, yeah, I mean that's a really good question, Jim. That's very interesting. And also let's not forget this, Don. Um, fire and safety makes a huge impact in these mazes because they've got a huge veto on this stuff. So I would say that with planning, probably 45% is creative, and then the rest is all fire and safety. What can we get through? Can we get people through safely? If there's a fire, can we get them out? If somebody has some sort of medical incident, can we get them out quickly? That sort of stuff too. Huge factor.
That is a great
Huge
point,
factor.
and a great point. And somebody, they'll bring up, went through this, corn maze, and it would have been great, but they had this one little opening here, and I could see outside of the corn
Right.
maze. Well, you have to, because like things you just mentioned. So there's so much involved with that. Thinking of every scenario of if something happened in this room, what do we do? And you have to think about that before you keep moving forward and have a plan for that
Also,
situation.
and the costs involved are so much more than you would ever imagine sometimes. So, for example, I know that there's a certain maze I went through that's in like a really tall building, and I heard people saying like, "Oh man, if they just put a top on it so you couldn't see all the way up, then it would be so much better." But if you put a lid on, if you put a roof on it, it means you got to have a sprinkler system, which means you're probably going to rent a sprinkler system. And I've been told that renting a sprinkler system for the month of October is like $40,000. So, in the grand scheme of budgets, that's not terrible, but why would you spend that when you can put it into creative or staffing or security or food service, anywhere else? So, a lot of the times it just has to make
You're right.
sense.
There's always those, yeah, there's always those, that you'll see, especially in the world I live in, and, monitoring, and, with social medias,
Right.
should have done this, should have done that. They should have this, they should have that. You can't have everything. Where would you put it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've got the space for it, but maybe you don't since you're in a closet right now. But for those of you watching at home, Don's recording in a closet right now. Um,
I'm in a storage room. This is my studio.
This is
This
your
is the best I
studio.
got.
Okay. We're going to get a real studio someday, Don. We're not going to record over Skype or in a church. Anyway, so I've got another really, really good question that I'm surprised we didn't kind of touch on during our initial conversation. This is from Coaster Team on Twitter. And he says, in the idea of entry prices, are there benefits/drawbacks to having a separate ticket rather than something that is more of a combined ticket? For example, Halloween Horror Nights Universal would be a separately ticketed event. So I'm going to expand on his question because Carowinds, for example, you do get in with your season pass, but they do flush out the park, for an hour. So I think that the answer to his question is obvious. You're bringing in specific people that'll pay a specific price, and you can do a better event, but it's for less people, and you can't necessarily offer it to season pass. And I think that's pretty obvious. So let's go with the more difficult question. Let's say your alternative is you flush out the park for an hour and then you bring in people that know that they're getting into a Halloween situation, but it's open to season passes, kind of like Scarowinds. What are the benefits and drawbacks to that compared to the way that a lot of parks do it, where it's just a transition at a certain time?
Well, I think it's going to be different for everybody. I don't think there's a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it. Everybody, you know, got a different, situation, and what's going to work best for them. You talked about Universal. It's a destination place. You're going to sell a lot of tickets in advance, 6, 7, 8 months out.
Mm-hmm.
People are planning their trips there for that. So it's going to work for them to do it that way. A lot of the seasonal parks, it's not going to work that way for them.
Right.
If you have a really big season pass base, it's probably not going to work as well
No.
for you with that. But then, if you have different rides, you have to be able to, so say you're on a Saturday, you're open, and you're trying to clear the house at 4 or 5, but if you would have to cut the line sometimes at 2 or 3 o'clock in the
Right.
afternoon
Yep.
to have
Absolutely.
everybody, and then, that doesn't give everybody in the daytime much opportunity to experience the park. So you have to be thinking about all those kind of
Hmm.
things before you would make that decision on whether you're a separate gate or it's just, an all day thing, that your admission includes the full day, so I just think you have to understand, again, who your audience, where you're drawing from, what the experience would be if you had to, middle of the day or early evening, cut it off and get everybody out of there. How are you going to do that? And if you've got attractions that, on a Saturday that it's typically going to have a 45 minute to an hour and 15 minute wait, um, as most parks do.
Hmm.
You're cutting that line at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. No one else can get in line, so it's not always the best experience there in that situation. So you really want to just just look at each park on a case by case basis on how that's going to work. Where's where the guests coming from? Or is
Right.
it it's a destination place like Universal, or most of them coming from within 45 minutes of the park that day, and
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
to just
and
go
and
from
I
there.
think
And
that there's going to be out because I feel like daytime people are not nighttime people, and it's very evident by the fact that the line to get out is just as long as the line to get in at 6 o'clock. Um, but
And here's something else for you, Ryan.
yeah,
A lot of the people that I've talked to that have said, "I'd love to see a separate gate here for this." Well, they're going to be there in the morning. They're just going to walk outside the gate and wait to walk right back in. They're going to still spend the full day there. So why not just leave them all in there the whole day?
yeah. I mean, I guess that they're looking for the benefits of the separate gate, which is fine. But I don't think that I think that'd be one of those things that wouldn't go over very well if you haven't always done it that way. Um, I used to room
Hard to change mid-course.
Right. So I used to have a roommate that was like a rides supervisor, and one of his responsibilities was to close the kiddie area at 6 o'clock or whatever. And despite the fact that there are signs everywhere, parents are always like, "What do you mean the kids area closes at 6? The park's open till 1 a.m." So there's no first of all, there's no effective way to communicate something out to everybody because I bet half of those people are sincere and just not knowing and being surprised and being upset, and maybe rightfully so. And then the other half are just like they want to say something, you know. But just imagine that, but park wide. What do you mean I can't ride
Right.
the shooting star or whatever? The park's open till mid. I could just see
Yeah.
it.
What I can tell you though, Ryan, is every park out there. I mean, there's a lot of smart people that work at all these parks, and they think of everything. And there's a reason why some parks have the separate gate, and there's reasons why other parks don't. And that's because that's what's going to work best in that particular market and
Right.
for that particular park.
Yeah, especially if it's a separately ticketed event. A friend of mine that works for Universal said that from a business standpoint, they see it as 2 days for the price of one. Because, I mean, all the Florida parks are busy all the time now. So they'll draw tens of thousands of people. It'll go down to zero for 2 hours. Then they'll draw tens of thousands of people again at 6 or 7 o'clock. So, I mean, from a business standpoint, it might make sense, but you're right. Why would you switch at this point? I mean, if if there was an issue with commingling on Saturdays where you were getting just tons of complaints, yeah, my kid's 5 years old. He was here for the costume contest. Now he has Freddy Krueger chasing him. Like I could understand why that conversation would come up, but at the same time, there's got to be a line where the parents have to be responsible and just be like, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe now it's not appropriate for my kids here." And again, it comes down to the park communicating out that after 6 or 7 o'clock, it's kind of changed. So, Don, if you were gonna have like let's say like a Bucky's themed haunted house,
Yeah.
what elements would you have in there?
Gosh. I think you would just have, you would have a lot of terrifying beavers everywhere.
Yeah, and then instead, like when you go through those rooms where it has the hanging bodies that you got to push yourself through, it's just giant not rawhide. What word am I looking for? The dried beef stuff.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I,
Yeah,
I can't think of what it's called. I'm losing. I'm sure the people listening to this podcast are going insane. Um,
we just lost everybody talking about a Bucky's themed
yeah,
Halloween
and
event.
then
But you know what? It can be
but then
done. It
have
could be
Bucky the
done.
Beaver at the very end, come and attack you and chase you out. If you had a haunted house in a Bucky's, it would take like an hour to get through it with how big they are. I remember when I worked at
Yeah,
Best Buy when I was in college, I remember thinking how cool it would be to turn the whole building, because I worked in a particularly large one, how cool it would be to turn that whole building into a haunted house, you know?
yeah. I when I worked at Cincinnati Gardens, I always wanted to do in the fall Halloween events in the annex building. I
Hmm.
thought that could be a perfect, walk-through attraction. It's a way to, because at the time, you only had the 40, 45 dates for the hockey team. So what can we do to have this building draw more people here? And I thought for a 6-week type of event that could be, really well done. So, yeah, you always think about different things like that when you work different places. Like, what if we could do this here or there?
Yeah, I do that in my office building now. Like, we're closed tonight. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, Don, any final thoughts on the Halloween season?
No more on the Halloween season, but you mentioned Twitter. We're over 120 followers now. We did talk several weeks ago when we first launched this podcast that once we got to 100, we would start to give away. So I have in my treasure trove of part memorabilia.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've seen a lot of people talking about lately was a book called Goodbye Coney Island.
Yep. I've got
Goodbye.
my copy here.
I happen You have yours there that you got. I had mine. A woman named Ruth Voss. Perhaps a lot of people listening to our podcast have heard of her. She was the former PR manager at Kings Island in the
Legend.
1980s. But this was in a box in my garage, and I've been kind of looking to clean it up a little bit, and I can't take all this stuff with me, so I got to start giving it to other people maybe. But Ryan, if you want to scroll through Twitter, let's randomly select someone and give them this prize.
Okay. All right. So just let me get to the right spot here. So I'm guessing we're going to give it away to somebody who's following us, not somebody we're following, because that would be a little counterproductive.
Following us,
Following us. Okay.
following us. Yeah, you had. Yeah, that was the rule we talked about. You can go back and listen to
Yeah.
the
So
podcast. You had to be following us to be eligible to win. And again, the first prize, it's a good one. Not all the things that we're going to give away here are Kings Island. I've got stuff from parks throughout the country,
yeah,
taking up
and Don,
space.
if you want to, I mean, I guess we'll communicate with the person who wins, but if you want to maybe give a little bit of words of wisdom on the last page of the book or something and sign it or something like that, you could.
I don't want to devalue it. I don't want to devalue it, so I'm not going to sign
All
it.
right, well then just put a personal check for like $5 in it. Oh wait, that'd probably be worth less than the book. Okay, let's do this. So we're scrolling through. Now remember, you can see this, but I can't because we're on camera. All I can see. Okay, now it's moving. Let's scroll through a little bit. And
Put your finger
this
on,
person.
scroll up and down. Who'd you pick?
Okay, so I've got Caleb Fry at Coaster Caffeine. And his description is caffeine and coasters. Same, Caleb. Same. Caleb, we are going to send you a private message on Twitter to talk about corresponding to get you this prize. But congratulations for being our very first giveaway winner. Caleb Fry at Coaster Caffeine. Awesome.
Yeah. So we want there to be value in following us other than just knowing what the next podcast is and that. So there will be some different things where we're giving away items. We'll start to do some trivia type things for about the industry.
I want to go live
So
on
just have a lot of
YouTube
fun
and
with
have
it.
a
So
like extravaganza at some point, give away 10 or 12 items in an hour. What do you think about that?
yeah, why not?
That
Oh,
could
I
be our
love the idea.
trivia,
Why not?
you know? Awesome. You can,
Hey, the red season's over. I got all the time in the world now in the evening for us to do these kind of things, Ryan.
ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that Don sacrificed going to the last Reds game of the season where they could have clinched a playoff spot if there was some sort of mass tragedy and a lot of the other teams got hurt and were unable to participate. The Reds are not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Anyway, tonight was the last Reds game. Don decided not to go to that to record this podcast. So thank you, Don, for doing that. Awesome. Cool. Well,
No, no
again,
problem.
make sure that if you aren't yet, follow us at attractions_GRP. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Just look for the Attractions Group podcast and search for the Attractions Group podcast on YouTube so you can join in all the fun. So, Don, this has been a fun one.
It has been. We've got some, guests coming up over the next, several weeks too that we think everyone's going to really enjoy those conversations. Tom Rebbe from the Philadelphia Toboggans Coasters Incorporated, John Keeter, who has put together a coffee table book of 50 years of history at Kings Island. You're going to love that
I
book
am
when it comes
so
out.
excited for that book. I heard about it
Yeah,
in April, and I was told it was coming out in 2 weeks, and this has been the longest 2 weeks of my life.
yeah, but we got a full lineup, and then we're going to be heading to IAPA in November,
Hmm.
and we'll be lining up a bunch of interviews and things there, and it's just going to continue to grow here on this channel, and we're glad that those of you that listen, those of you that follow us on Twitter, we're glad to have you, and it's going to be a lot of fun coming down the road, a lot of interesting people that you're going to hear from the attractions
Yeah,
industry.
I agree. And if you guys see us on the IAPA floor, and you can't miss us because we're going to be the only two jerks wearing Hawaiian shirts, come up and say hi. By all means, we'd love to meet you because we do this so people will listen to it. So we're as honored, probably more honored to meet you than you are to meet us. So yeah, awesome, cool. Well, we will see you next week. We'll have another excellent episode of the Attractions Group podcast. Thank you for listening.